On today's Patriot Nation podcast, we are talking offensive line and obviously quarterback. You know we're going to be talking quarterback and all sorts of other things with the one and only Mark Schofield comes on back, joins the show again. We're so excited to have him. So it's a heck of a show. So buckle up and cue the music. Mark, thanks for coming back, man. Really appreciate it. It's good to see your face, man. It's been a long time.
Pat, is it? We're all friends here. You can be honest. Is it really good to see this at 9:30 on a Tuesday night?
I mean,
come on, be honest.
It's not bad. It could be. There are worse things.
That's true. It could be worse. You were talking before the show about the stuff that you're dealing with the puppy being spayed and everything. So I guess it's probably better to look at this face than anything else right now.
Right? Yeah. So excited. We're excited. Finally in the friggin' off season. The goddamn season. We didn't even talk about the Super Bowl, by the way. We just glossed right over it. Never happened. I've honestly, and I've been meaning to write something for Pat's Pulpit for like weeks now, and I just haven't been able to. I've just been so like sad and mad and like everything else. Like there's all sorts of emotions, and I like can't. I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to talk about it. I just don't even want to like discuss it because I'm just so annoyed at what went down and how it went down and the fact that Gronk and AB got rings too. And it's like, just, and freaking Bruce Arians, like, God damn it. Like, all those, like.
I said it to you when they're in the NFC Championship game. We could look back on this in 5 years and say it was a blessing in disguise because it lit a little fire under Bill Belichick's butt, right? Like,
right.
7-9, he's hearing all the scrutiny coming his way. He's got a boatload of cap space. I guess that's just me being optimistic, but
right.
if he needs a little more fire headed into the offseason, that's all he needed right there. So
right.
Yeah, I mean, look, a motivated Bill Belichick, I think, is a good thing, especially now when, as we all do in the media, like everybody's saying that all the Brady versus Belichick debate, that's over. It was all Brady.
Right.
He goes and wins a Super Bowl year one. Belichick finishes 7-9. The debate's over. It's done with. Belichick's an afterthought. Belichick can say that he doesn't read it, but he knows. He reads this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He's heard this stuff. And so I'd imagine that, look, they've got some decisions to make, but they have cap space. They have draft capital. They're just going to hit on what they do over the next couple of weeks here. But they've got opportunities to make some moves here in free agency, starting the next couple of weeks that I think could really change the course of this franchise and make it so it's a blip, sort of a 1 year off year rather than a tear down and rebuild situation, which I think we're all hoping they do their best to avoid.
Right. Yeah, and I think when you look at it too, kind of looking back and digesting the season, considering the amount of turnover they had at multiple spots, key spots, quarterback, you had some young linebackers in there, Chung opt out, a ton of guys that played meaningful snaps. Then you come in, you have COVID, so there's no offseason. I think a lot of those guys, we said it all the time, would have benefited from an offseason, those year one, those year two guys. And then you get a quarterback in there 3 weeks before camp, like I said, no offseason, and they somehow win 7 games. Like, you can look at it. I guess that's glass half full.
Yeah.
But like, the fact they won 7 games is like, oh my God, when you kind of talk about it like that, it's like, as bad as they were and how weird it was of a year, I guess they're not so far away, but it seems like they are.
I was saying before the year started that Belichick could do the best coaching job of his entire NFL career, and this team might go 7-9. Because with COVID, the opt-outs, Cam signing late, the schedule that they had to play, the fact that, like, look, Buffalo made it to the AFC Championship game. Miami just missed out on the playoffs. Like, the AFC East was a tough division this year. And you look at their, outside of the division schedule, you look at the fact they had to play the NFC West, which got 2 teams into the postseason. It was a tough year, no matter what. And, like I said, they've went 7-9, and Belichick did a really good job coaching this team, I think. The team is going to be helped immediately with the guys coming back from opt-outs. I think the fact that Chun opted out put them in a position where Duggar had to play meaningful snaps in a year where he was supposed to sit and watch and play the role of caddy. And I think that's going to help because now he's got that first year under his belt. That's done. Like, the learning curve is already here. So I think that will be a benefit for this defense going forward. But they do have decisions to make. Gilmore is obviously one. I know we're going to talk about Phil Perry's mock, but that's a decision that's floating out there. And they've got some decisions to make with respect to their own free agents. Spags and I were talking before the show about, Guy and Butler up front on the defensive line. Like, you look at the interior defensive line free agency class, you look at this interior defensive line draft class, it's not great. And so those guys are going to get offers, and it might be hard to keep one or both of them. So that's going to be something you're going to have to deal with. And free agency in general, you look at trying to draw people to New England might be a bit tougher right now than it's been in years past. And that could also be a problem because you might have to pay a little bit more. You might have to play a bit more of a premium to get players to come to New England than you had in years past. Maybe. Yeah. I mean, It's not come play with Belichick and Brady and win a Super Bowl. It's come play with Belichick and maybe turn a 7-9 team into a playoff team.
Right.
Like, what's the cost for that if you're a free agent and you're looking at that offer and say the Dolphins to go play in South Beach or the Bucks to go maybe play with Brady?
Right. And that's the challenge that they're going to face. And, I mean, I don't know if it's as drastic as PFF had the Patriots signing 0 of the top 50 free agents, which I was like, what are you, nuts? I just can't imagine with the amount of cap room that they have to not sign any of those guys. And maybe they only signed 1 or 2, but to sign 0 of them just seemed bizarre to me. But, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, we've seen Belichick in so many other free agent cycles do more on that secondary free agent market than anything else, right? So even with that money, they might still say, look, yeah, we could get in on Kenny Golladay and pay a premium on him, or we could wait and say a little bit later in free agency, one of the other receivers that's out there, maybe a Brashard Perryman, who's obviously not the talent that Golladay is, but he's going to come at like a third of the price. So maybe you take 2 cracks at the wide receiver apple, and instead of signing Golladay, you go with Brashard Perryman and Rashard Higgins, like who's also out there.
Right.
That's like a typical Belichick type of move. Give yourself more bites at the apple. I love Golladay. I just did a video about him last week. I think he's like the universal fit at wide receiver. Same with Allen Robinson. Chris Godwin's great, but it's just very un-Belichick-like to say, here's, 20 million per for one of those guys.
Right.
I just don't think that's the way he's going to handle it. And from their perspective, if you're Allen Robinson, you've spent your career dating back to college catching passes from Christian Hackenberg, Blake Bortles, and Mitchell Trubisky.
And you want to come here?
Are you going to come here and catch passes from TBD? Like, that's a tough sell.
Yeah, and we'll get into that too. Like, that's going to be the toughest thing. And it's not even for a wide receiver, right? Like you said, you want to come here and you're going to have to maybe pay a little bit more. You also want to sell that you can win, even to an edge player, an offensive lineman, a cornerback. It's like, I don't know how quarterback's the most important position on the field. We all know that. How are you going to tell me we're going to win if we don't have a player right now?
Right.
So I hope they got something down the pipeline, like we talked about before. Like, there's going to be some dominoes to fall. The Watson saga, Wentz and Darnold, even guys like that. Like, once those chips fall,
that's the guy. I wish that Sam Darnold had been drafted by any other franchise, because had he been drafted by any other franchise in the NFL,
they'd be all in on him.
The Patriots would be all in on him. You're talking about a guy that's like $5 million this year. And if you accept the fifth year bonus, which I would in a heartbeat, it's like 22. So you're talking about like a guy that's under $30 million for the next 2 years, who was a top 5 pick a few years ago and is going to be 24 when the season starts. That's an absolute no-brainer. It's just he plays for the Jets, and there's no way that the Jets are going to trade them to. Now, unless the Patriots come in with the best offer, and then maybe they do it. But still, I don't know. I find it hard to believe that the Jets would send, their, even if it's the quarterback that they, lost faith in and don't believe in anymore, I still find it hard to believe that they're going to send him here. Yeah,
I mean, it would be a tough sell if you're Joe Douglas, because you might have to sell the ownership on that. Like, we're going to move on from Sam Darnold, and we're trading him to the New England Patriots. Like, that might be a tough sell. The difference maker there, though, is you've got a new head coach. And obviously, Robert Saleh has his vision for what he wants the New York Jets to be. A lot of people have said Zach Wilson at 2 is the play there for them. And you could see how he might fit in with the offense that they're going to run. Obviously, with LaFleur brother as the offensive coordinator, you expect that Shanahan, McVay, LaFleur. Outside zone boot action, I think Zach Wilson would be a fit for that. And if the Patriots do put the best offer on the table for Sam Darnold,
Why help a divisional team when you went from the best quarterback situation for the last 20 years now to the worst, and then trade Darnold to the reclamation projects that come here and
Right.
go help him, and then he torches you for 20. Like, that'd be so Jets.
Yeah,
It'd be so
it
Jets.
would be. But that might make it, easier for New England to make an offer that looks the best.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, if I'm the Patriots, I'm right now calling the Jets saying, listen, we'll give you 46 and a fourth rounder. And I don't know if a team is going to outbid them on that. I don't know. Now, maybe they will, but I don't know if they're going to get more than a second and a fourth for Sam Darnold, who at this point looks like a lost cause. And I know he's super young, and that's what you're buying, is that he's super young, and you're bringing in a guy, instead of bringing in a guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick here, you're bringing in a guy who's 24 years old who, of course, it looks like a disaster, but if you can fix him, has the potential to be, a superstar in this league.
Yeah, I think, you sort of just touched on like the biggest elephant in the room, which is the fix him part. And this isn't like Darnold specific, but it's the organization from New England's perspective. Do they have the ability to develop a rookie or fix a younger quarterback? And I don't know if they do. They haven't really had to do it. Obviously, when you're blessed with 20 years of Tom Brady, you don't need to test your developmental chops as an organization. But Josh McDaniels has had opportunities to develop quarterbacks, and he hasn't really done it. Tim Tebow, an example. Does Jarrett Stidham count? If so, that's also an example and not a good one. Right. So if you're going to make that trade for Sam Darnold, you have to believe in your ability to fix a quarterback. Now, Darnold could be pretty easy to fix. And it could be as simple as getting him away from Adam Gase, because I don't think Adam Gase did him any favors. And I don't understand how Adam Gase has this reputation as being a quarterback guru based on a year of telling Peyton Manning just to go out and do what he wants. And as a result, Adam Gase is a quarterback guru. Must be a nice gig if you can get it. So maybe just simply getting him away from Adam Gase will fix him. I don't know. But I'm with you, though. Generally speaking, I'm on board with the idea of Sam Darnold. Like I think, in terms of tiering the current NFL options at quarterback, like there's Deshaun Watson. Yeah, if you can get Deshaun Watson, fantastic. But you're not going to be able to get Deshaun Watson. Like you're not going to be able to match what any other team can put in front of you. Then there's that next group of like the Garoppolo tier, which could end up happening. But I do like the Darnold option out of all of these. The question is, can you make it happen? And B, you would have to trust in your ability to develop them.
Right. No, that's true. That's true. All right, let's get into what we're supposed to be talking about. Which we're going to talk about the quarterback position until they find a quarterback. We're going to talk about the quarterback position. So that's going to be every show. Yep. But I do want to talk about the offensive line, and we'll start with the guys that are currently on the team. Marcus Cannon, of course, opted out. There were some questions last year about whether he was going to retire or not. He's got a fairly big cap hit, not a massive cap hit, but a fairly big cap hit. I think they get about $7 million relief if he were to either not come back or retire. And then, of course, you have Joe Thuney, who they franchised last year, who's an unrestricted free agent, and David Andrews, who's also an unrestricted free agent. Give me your list as to, first of all, do you think Cannon comes back? And then second of all, what you think will happen with Thuney and Andrews and what needs to happen with Thuney and Andrews?
I mean, with respect to, I think Cannon comes back, and I do think that you're going to want him in the fold. We saw what happened to this team without a viable swing tackle option behind when Luminor had his struggles at times. So I would like to have Marcus Cannon back in the fold. Thuney is going to be really tough. Obviously, it's basically the same situation that we had last year, right? Both Thuney and Brandon Sheriff, they're guards 1A and 1B. Stack them in any order you want. Those are the two guys. You might have Joe Thuney at the top of that tier because Sheriff has a bit of an injury history. He had the torn pec from a couple years ago. He's had some elbow injuries as well. He's going to probably command a decent offer. But at the same time, like the strength of this Patriots team right now, not just the offense, I think is the offensive line, and in particular the interior offensive line with Mason, with Andrews, with Joe Thuney. And I think you have to really take a swing at trying to get Thuney back. Because whether you're developing a young quarterback, whether you're trying to fix a Sam Darnold, like you have to have an offensive line up front that you trust. So yeah, I would throw as much as you could with the cap space you have at Britton Joe Tooney back. Letting him go, I think, would be a disaster for this team from a roster construction standpoint. But he's gonna have teams lining up to get him. Like if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you just saw what the Cleveland Browns did this year with building an offensive line.
Right.
Like built that offensive line. That's how you take Baker Mayfield and fix him. And so teams are going to be lining up to throw money at this guy, and I don't know if they're going to be able to keep him. I don't know if they pay enough to keep him.
Well, also you have Onwenu there.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that it's kind of like, how do you justify? Because the guy's one of the best guards in the league, but like,
right,
you almost have to say, well, Onwenu is going to then play right tackle, then, right, and then keep Tooney at right guard.
You say justify. What would they be paying their two guards, right? Like Mason and not. I mean, they're well worth it, right? Like they're two of the best, top 10 in the league. But from a raw, like I don't know how you can stomach giving two guards, especially when you had Onwenu and how well he looked. And I know Belichick made a note of it at the end of kind of one of his end of the year press conferences, maybe before week 17 or week 16, kind of the progress of players and the younger guys. And they mentioned that Onwenu, saw some time at tackle. They really liked what they saw in him at guard. And, this will be a big off season for him in terms of kind of where they view him in the future. I'm obviously paraphrasing here, but I wonder, because you have a question at right tackle with Cannon. Is he going to come back? If he comes back, do you try to restructure him so you get that cap hit a little bit lower? Does he make it through camp? Like, there's so many questions there. Then you lose Tooney. You have a replacement behind him in Onwenu. I don't know. You're filling one hole but keeping another one open. So I definitely think they look offensive line relatively early, maybe even in the top 100, whether it's guard or tackle.
Yeah, I think they've got flexibility in the sense that we've seen Onwenu at different spots on the offensive line. And if they feel like they have to put him at right tackle, they feel comfortable doing that. If they feel like they've got to put him at guard, if Tooney does leave, they can do that. And the other thing is Isaiah Wynn. As good as he's looked at left tackle, like if you've got a left tackle option that falls into your lap somehow in the draft, or if you've got a left tackle option that falls into your lap in free agency, and there's some intriguing tackle options in free agency, you might feel better about letting Tooney walk, kick and win inside because that's where most everybody expected him to play in the National Football League. It's on a left tackle. Like they've got some flexibility with this offensive line because of the guys like Wynn and Onwenu have shown positional versatility in the past, whether it's Onwenu in the NFL or Wynn and the exposure he's had at playing guard, most of the Senior Bowl and some reps in preseason and things like that.
Out of all their free agents, though, I will be crushed if David Andrews leaves. That's a Patriot lifer right there, man. Like his red jacket's waiting for him. I don't think he goes anywhere. I think they do everything they can to keep him. I think that's a guy that, hey, wink, wink, like type of team friendly deal, whatever you want to put it. And you saw how, awful that line looked without him 2 years ago, Brady, right? Like he's so important to that team from a leadership standpoint, the anchor of that line. So he's played so many meaningful football games. I think, Tooney and Andrews 1A, 1B, however you want to put them. You got to retain at least one of them, put it that way. And I think they will.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, of the two, Andrews is probably going to be the easier to bring back.
Right.
Tooney is going to command probably. You look at any sort of free agent rankings out there, like Joe Tooney is a top 15 type of free agent. David Andrews isn't. And so I think, there are a couple of free agents on the market at the center spot. Lindsey, the guy from Green Bay. There's some intriguing options in the draft. Creed Humphrey is one. The Minards kid from UW Whitewater. I think he's more of a late day 2, early day 3 guy. But I think he could play in the National Football League right away. So if they had to replace David Andrews, I think they could.
Landon Dickinson too, right, from Alabama.
Yeah, he's got the injury history. He's probably a first, round 1 talent, but the medicals are going to be huge for him. With no combine this year, that's going to be, even a tougher evaluation standpoint. But yeah, look, there are center options. There are guard options too, like Wyatt Davis. the kid from Ohio State.
Mhm.
And he'll probably be there at 15 if he wanted to go that route. I can only imagine, though, the reaction if the Patriots draft a guard at 15. Like, my God,
Oh
people would
my
lose their
goodness.
minds.
I almost hope it happens just to see
Yeah,
it.
just for the chaos.
But
I mean, a guard or a safety at 15, people would just lose it.
people would lose it. It
Yeah.
would be absolute chaos. Absolute chaos. It'd be good for content, but it would be
I mean, it'd be
absolute
great for content. I mean, look, we all have to prepare ourselves for the Patriots to trade out of 15 and trade back. Like,
Right.
that's like the nightmare scenario that Spags is already twitching. I can see it right now.
Yeah, I mean, they're like in the worst spot. Like they're 7-9 at 15 with
Yeah.
no quarterback, probably no chance at 4, maybe even in the top 5, wherever you have Mac Jones fall.
Yeah.
You don't land one of them, like
Right.
trade back. They don't have their own third. They have a kind of a gap between 46 and 96, wherever
Yeah.
that Brady comp pick comes in. I'm okay, right? Like we talked about it with Brad Kelly, and he had mentioned, Jacksonville, new coach, new franchise quarterback. That's a team that might want to get up and try to get 3 first-round picks. You can swap a 33 in their second or their third and pick up a boatload of picks inside the top 100. I'm okay with that too.
Right. I'm team trade down. I am. I'm at this point because for me personally, there's 3 guys, and Kyle Pitts, I'll say begrudgingly because everybody loves Kyle Pitts, and I'm like, look, I like Kyle Pitts, but I'm like, yeah, okay, tight end, sure, I guess at
He's
15.
the best
fine.
tight end
I know.
prospect to come out probably since Gronk.
I know,
He's
but he's a tight end.
He's a tight end in name only, man.
I know.
I mean,
but he's a slow. So
So
what? He's a
good,
slow
man.
slot receiver. I don't know. Anyways, regardless, so I'll begrudgingly put Kyle Pitts in the list. But for me, it's Pitts, it's Micah Parsons, it's Jalen Waddle. If those 3 guys aren't there, I don't care. I don't care what they do. Now, obviously, if like Justin Fields lasts the 15, which is not going to happen. Nope. Like those guys, I don't care. Like those are the 3 guys for me. If those 3 guys are gone, then I don't care what they do at 15 because I'm fine with then trading back. You don't need anything else. Like to me, those guys are, you change the way you play football type of guys. Like Micah Parsons in the middle of that defense with the speed and athleticism that he has playing linebacker changes the way they play defense. Jalen Waddle with the speed that he plays wide receiver changes the way they play offense. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that I'm looking at. And I feel like even a guy like Kwity Paye, very good, but like, does he change what they do defensively? Like he's a good player, but like if you could trade back and pick up like, a late first rounder and a first next year, or like an early second rounder and a first next year, or like an early second rounder and a late second, or whatever the case may be, like, I don't know. I feel like that might be a better option for them than drafting someone at 15 who's like pretty good, but like, isn't like an absolute blue chip game changing prospect,
Yeah, I mean, look, they're in a tough spot, like at 15, because you're basically out of the quarterback game, especially this year. You've got a number of different holes that you could address, and one guy at 15 isn't going to address that. You are going to have that gap, like Ryan was just talking about, from the pick at 46 to that Brady comp pick. And we all know that Belichick often views like 60 to 100 as like the sweet spot of most drafts. And right now they don't have a pick in that spot.
He did the same thing last year. We all said,
Sure.
they had a gap between 23 and 87. And we're like, well, he absolutely 100% will have to draft, a few times. And of course they trade back and pick up 2 picks in that spot. So it's like, it seems like inevitable that that's what's coming, And,
the other thing is this, the elephant in the room is how are teams going to value this year's draft class, generally speaking,
right?
Like Trey Lance, as talented as that kid is, how much are you going to trust your evaluation of just one game of film? Jamar Chase, as talented as he is, he opts out. Like, he made the decision, and that's fine, but we know how NFL organizations think. And so we might see some teams punt this year around the edges and pick up, say, future, first and seconds in exchange for a first-round pick. I don't know if the Patriots are going to do that, but it's something that they might do. It's something that teams might do, and that's another thing we have to be considered here. As high as I am, look, I love Kyle Pitts. I saw my right arm off if the Patriots would get him as a result in a heartbeat.
So that means they're not going to, because you're willing to do that.
That means exactly that they will not be drafting Kyle Pitts. And for everybody that say they don't need another tight end, like I've seen some people say that he's not a tight end. Like he's a matchup nightmare. Like he had this little it's not like quite like a sluggo, but he had a touchdown against Kentucky that he beat a corner who's probably an early day 2 pick at some point in his career. And he just ran right by him. Just absolutely ran by him. This when they were doing things with him, they would flex him out on the goal line, and they'd either run a slant if he was against a corner or a fade or whatever. And I was having flashes to vintage Gronk. When they would do that, they would come out in jumbo, but then they'd flex Gronk out and say, whatever we're getting, we're going to run a slant or a fade, and you're just not going to stop it. And that's what he was doing in the SEC. And so, look, if he's there at 15, great, but he's probably not going to be there at 15 because he's just not going to be there at 15. And so, yeah, I understand like they might trade down, and I think we, as Patriots fans, we should always be stealing ourselves for that potential because we've seen Belichick do it so many times.
Right. No, that's a good point. It's a good point. So we'll see. Now, in the draft, offensive line wise, say, you can say 15 or even later on in the draft, who are the guys that you think, can come in and help the Patriots right away? Obviously, we don't know what the situation is going to look like, but we think that they're, probably going to attack the tackle spot, we would think. And we know that Bill always loves the interior offensive lineman, and he loves having that draft capital anyways, regardless of what's going on. Now he's invested quite a bit in the last few years, right? 4 draft picks in the last 2 years. So maybe they kind of shy away from it a little bit, but I don't think that that's going to happen. I think they're going to probably target another guy or two. And who do you think really fits well here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird tackle class. Obviously Sewell, the kid from Oregon, everybody's losing their minds over him, but he's incredibly talented. He's not going to be in the discussion at 15. I think at 15, there's a potential that Slater's there. And look, if you go, he's a guy that opted out. But you watch what he did 2 years ago in the Big Ten championship game against Chase Young. I mean, that's a guy that can play offensive tackle in the National Football League in a heartbeat. Right. So if he's there at 15, like I'd be fine with that because the kid can play. Now, I don't think he's there. And then
you say, you draft him, you do bump Wynn inside, right? You maybe on one to right tackle, Andrews and Mason. That's a pretty good offensive line.
That's a pretty good offensive line, Spags. I'd be fine with that offensive line week 1 next year. Doesn't matter who your quarterback is. I think that offensive line could block for whoever it is, whether it's a more pocket passer type or a more athletic guy. Slater can fit both those schemes. As you get a little bit later into the first round, I like the North Dakota State kid Dylan Radins. I thought he was great at the Senior Bowl when I got to see him on tape. We had a couple of reps in one-on-ones, but I think overall, like he's a kid that I really like. Cosby, the Texas kid, he's probably in the discussion of 46, who's somebody I think can play pretty well in the National Football League, but doesn't have the athleticism as some of these upper end guys. But I do like him. There's going to be a massive debate about Leatherwood, the Alabama kid. On film, looked good. Looked really good. But then he goes down to the Senior Bowl and he just had a bad week.
Yeah.
He just had a really bad week down there. And then talk to some people and they're like, he was one of the worst tackles down in Mobile. I think his film is better than that, but I think he's going through a bit of a slide. He might now be a round 3 guy. And he's somebody that at the start of the year, people were thinking maybe a first rounder. I like Hainsey, the Notre Dame kid. I think he did some things on film that I liked, but I think had a fantastic having the other Notre Dame, the interior guy from Notre Dame, I think did a fantastic job down in Mobile and really sort of helped themselves. So those are some guys that I like. The other kid is James Hudson, the Cincinnati guy. Really like some of the stuff he did on film. Really like some of the stuff he did on the Senior Bowl. And I know our boy, the Senator Walker Little, the Stanford kid,
right,
had him at 46. That's an interesting. I don't know if it was 46, but he had him in the second round. That's an interesting name. A lot of people really liked him coming into this year, but we saw with guys like Darisaw, who's really sort of moving up boards right now. Little slid back a bit, but certainly an interesting option. You start thinking interior offensive line. It's hard not to be excited about the D3 kid.
Yeah.
Quinn Meinerz.
The belly,
you know,
the gut.
the
What do they
belly.
call him? The gut.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
look,
yeah.
I know one of his coaches, Owen Reese, really well. And Owen was telling me like this time last year, he's like, "We got a kid, man. We got a kid that's going to play in the league. I can tell you that right now." And he's got that finishers type mentality, that old school approach. But he was dominant at times at the Senior Bowl, but he was dominant on film, and that's what you want to see from a D3 kid.
Right.
And look, if they do pick up picks in that, say, like 70 to 90 range, like I think that's a sweet spot for that kid in this draft. And look, if you lose Tooney, I think he can play left guard right away. I certainly think he could. I think he could play center in the NFL. That's what they were using most at the Senior Bowl, but I think he could play center or guard in the NFL for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's just, I think there's a lot of guys that are there that, and we don't know, right? I mean, guys like Onwenu, no one's talking about Michael Onwenu going into the draft, like nobody. And the guy gets drafted in the 6th round, and he comes out and he dominates in the NFL and turns into one of the best offensive linemen that got drafted last year. And so, you look at it and just say, we don't really know what the hell's going on, right? But it's interesting to kind of see what those guys look like. And now, especially, you get guys that opted out, you get guys that were hurt, you get guys that that didn't play a ton, because and so it's like everything's a crapshoot this year. But it is interesting to see some of these guys, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Patriots targeted at least one or two of them. But
yeah, I mean, what was interesting because everybody was on Ruiz and everybody was on Bredesen, the other two Michigan interior offensive guys. And when it was like sort of an afterthought, I remember watching Bredesen a ton and thinking, yeah, this guy could certainly play. And we all loved Ruiz. Everybody thought like, look, Patriots might draft that kid early. So you might see some, guys in the later rounds that nobody's really talking about. Robert Jones from Middle Tennessee. He's a guy that's probably a day 3 guy in the interior offensive line. I haven't watched a ton of his game tape, but I loved what he did at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was dominant at times. Deontay Brown, the huge mammoth of a guy at Alabama.
Play guard and tackle.
Can play guard, can play tackle. There were some people that thought he was disappointed at the Senior Bowl. I wasn't disappointed by him at all. I thought he moved well for a guy of that size. When they did outside zone, wide zone stuff, I thought he moved pretty well, got up to the second level pretty well. Is he going to get beat by quicker interior rushers? Yeah, sure. But if you try any sort of power move on him, forget it. You're done from jump. You're just done. You're not going to get through that guy. He's just a massive human being. Would I be afraid of drafting him on day 3? Absolutely not.
Yeah. And I think that's what it all comes down to, right? Is the value and where you're taking them, So, but it's interesting. And again, we'll see. I think that the dominoes are going to start at the beginning of free agency when we see what happens with Tooney, when we see what happens with Cannon, when we see what happens with Andrews, and then we're going to know what they're going to be doing. If they lose Tooney and Andrews and Cannon doesn't come back, now they have to address, a few positions on the offensive line.
Right.
So I don't imagine that happening, but that'd be like absolute worst case scenario, sound the alarm, like we need to figure something out, so
yeah. And I think if that happens, we've got bigger problems, right? Because if we see that kind of mass exodus, like all the stories about Brady versus Belichick and all that stuff, now all the stuff we started talking about at the start of the show, like that's when it's really time to worry, right? Like if they can't bring those guys back, if there's just like mass exodus, man, yeah, we're talking about that sort of tear down and rebuild scenario.
Spencer Rattler 2022.
Seriously, that kid can slit it though. Oh, yeah. I mean, that kid's fun to watch.
I'm just waiting for next year because everyone was, there was the whole thing Friday about Zach Wilson not being a captain, or was he a captain, or was he not? And then wait till Spencer Rattler next year when everyone watches his QB1 on Netflix and see how he was a punk in senior year of high school. It's like, he's going to drop. It's like, I don't think you should judge a kid when he was 16 years old. But
no, absolutely not. But no, Rattler, Sam Howell. I mean, there's going to be some good arms coming up.
Daniels.
Yeah, he's good too. He's good too.
It's interesting. Right. So, all right, let's get into this Phil Perry mock, because I was fascinated at this Phil Perry mock. So Phil, of course, good friend of the show, NBC Sports, of course. He has the Patriots trading up to 4 with the Falcons and drafting Zach Wilson. To get to 4, he has them giving up 15, 46, and a 2022 second rounder. I mean, that's like the biggest no-brainer in the history of Earth. I mean, if that's available,
I mean, look, I love Phil. I adore Phil. If that's all it takes to get to 4, then yeah, sure, absolutely. I can't imagine that's all it's going to take.
Well,
Like,
we were talking to Evan Lazar last week, and he was saying kind of the opposite. Like, everyone thinks it's this king's ransom to move up, 8, 9 slots, right? Like what they do for Mahomes. Is it their first and next year's first and a third or something, right? I mean, but that was for the 10th pick. I don't know. I mean, he might be a little off, but there's not a known price tag for something like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, according to the Rich Hill chart, and of course, like the Rich Hill chart,
that's awesome.
Which is pretty dope that everyone uses the Rich Hill chart, which is pretty cool. But anyway, so according to the Rich Hill chart, it's actually a little bit of an overpay by the Patriots to get up to 4. The thing is that might be true, but if Zach Wilson is sitting there at 4, and somehow the Jets have either passed on a quarterback or drafted Fields, and then the Dolphins have not traded out of 3 or traded 3, and that team has either drafted Fields or not drafted a quarterback or drafted trade, or whatever the case may be, you get to 4, and Zach Wilson's still available at 4, and the Falcons are actively shopping that pick. You got to think they're gonna look for a king's ransom to move that pick. And so while the value might be there, if you're a Falcons fan, you're looking at that saying, all you got was 15 and 2 second rounders. Like, what the hell, dude? And it's not like, and I know they have Julio and Matt Ryan still. I know they have some talent there, but they're drafting number 4 overall for a reason. Like, they're still not that good of a team, and so like, you shouldn't at least be in a win now mode, especially playing in the division you play where you're not going to win the division next year. So like, now you're fighting in as a wild card, trying to win the Super Bowl as a wild card. I don't see it, but shoot, I mean, if that's what it takes, like,
I mean, if that's the price to get Zach Wilson, I'll pay it in a heartbeat. Like, no questions asked. I do think that, especially like you just walked through that scenario, Pat, you're going to have teams 7, 8, 12, maybe. That's Detroit, that's Carolina, that's San Francisco. Now clamoring to get up to that board for that pick. So I do think that the price will go up to try to get up there. The Mahomes sort of analogy is a good one from Spags. I think the difference is, that year there weren't as many teams in like dire quarterback straits. Now that the number of teams that are going to need a quarterback will definitely be fewer come draft time, because the Wentz situation will play itself out. The Watson situation will play itself out. Jimmy Garoppolo might have a new home, and so that might take, say, hypothetically, Carolina out of the mix. Maybe he goes there. Who knows?
Here's a question too. So if, say, we get to week 3 of free agency, right, and Jarrett Stidham is still the only one on the depth chart, like, are we almost expecting something like this to happen? Like, this is a possibility that they're really trying to get up, right? Like, you get through those obstacles, fall, you don't get a Garoppolo, Newton's still floating around. I mean, maybe that's like kind of on the back burner, like, hey, we got this guy if we really, really need him. But you get through the first 3 weeks and you still don't have a plan at quarterback. Do we start bracing ourselves for, hey, maybe they're really trying to get up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. The only fear is if you swing and miss at that, like, what's the fallback plan? Because
probably Cam Newton.
Yeah. And, look, Mike Giardi said it today. What, 35, 40% chance that Cam's back here next year? They might be viewing it as Stidham. We'll have Cam back, and we'll take our swing at the top of the board. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll run it back with Cam and see if we can piece a better offense around him. What that offense will look like, who knows? We'll be look a little bit better with Kyle Pitts. I'll say that. I'm going to keep hammering that home.
Hey, man,
I'm going to speak it into existence.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with lobbying for your guys, as Spags and I know. Yeah. Sometimes it backfires, but you lobby for your guys.
You're not going to miss on that one, though.
No, that's true.
I just don't see how you can. I mean, the idea of Pitts in a pseudo 12 personnel package with whether it's Devin CSC or whoever at the other tight end, Edelman and Myers at the other 2 wide receiver spots. Like, I think you could do a lot of that stuff. I think you could do a lot with that sort of package.
Yep. Keegan's with you. Cam in year 2 and take a swing at Trey Lance. I mean, listen, I'm on board. I'm on board theoretically for Cam in year 2. I think it's a dangerous game, like Spag said. Like, it's a dangerous game to not bring in a quarterback and say, hey, like, oh, we got this thing going on and we're gonna try to get up and get someone. I think that's a dangerous game if you're looking at it saying we don't want Stidham as a starting quarterback, but we're also not going to go out and pay someone because we're going to try to get up in the draft and get someone. I just, because what happens if those 4 guys go 1, 2, 3, 4, and now you're like, well, I guess we're taking Mac Jones at 15. Like that's not where we want to go, and so that's a challenging thing for me,
I said since the year ended, like, if you can't get up and get one of those guys and you don't want to overpay or somehow can't get one of those veterans on the market, like, I'm all right with rolling into next year with the same quarterback room, assuming you upgrade the wide receiver room, the tight end room, and make that person's job easier. And you let whoever you bring in, Stidham, Cam, and a day 3 guy like a Kellen Mond or a Felipe Frank, someone like that, battle it out. Like that, if that's what they got to do, I think if you upgrade the positions around them, right, like wide receiver, tight end, you won 7 games with that group last year at a first-place schedule. A year with, much more off-season time together, another year together, guys coming in that can help you. I think you're 2-3 wins better. Does that make the playoffs? You might sneak in, but that's an upgrade from last year.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to that. You have this opportunity to have a pick at 15, and you could spend this draft capital in a number of different ways. If you can package it to get up and that pans out, fantastic. If not, look, like we were talking about before the show, Ryan, Cam signed so late into this process with no preseason, no training camp games, and he was thrown to Damier Byrd and Jacoby Myers and down the stretch.
Nothing else.
And this team still won 7 games. And Cam Newton contracted COVID in the middle of the season.
Almost won 10. Certainly
didn't look great the first couple of games back. With a first-place schedule and playing the NFC West. And so, will Patriots fans be elated if that's the pick, the move, the path? Probably not. Could it work out? I think it could.
Yeah, I think they would. I think people would be realistic. People would be okay with it, assuming, right, like Jalen Waddle or Tylan Wallace day 2, and they sign one of those second-tier wide receivers that, like I like to say every week, a Brandon LaFell type production, come in, catch you 50, 60 balls. And then you're not the top 10, even top 15 wide receiver room in the league, but you're a lot better than you were last year. I think that ultimately wins you a few more games. I think if they do that, I think realistic people are like, okay, I see what they're doing. They're going to wait this out. Cam, another year in the system, more time. Who knows what we see from Stidham in year 3 and in developmental year. I don't know. I mean, I guess it's not the worst. It is probably the worst case scenario for 2021.
Well,
maybe long term.
The worst case scenario is going that route, but drafted, I don't know, like Nasran Nizruddin, the safety at 15.
Right. Christian Barmore or something like that.
Yeah, and then drafted Marvin Wilson at 46, like an interior defensive lineman that has some issues. Like, if you go that route and you haven't done anything to help Cam Newton or Jarrett Stidham or the day 3 pick, you draft a quarterback. Like, I think that's the worst case scenario. Like, that's like, I think if the Patriots get weapons at 15 and get weapons at 46 and go back with Cam, like, I think that's okay. Most people will probably view that as the worst case scenario. No, that's the worst case scenario. Right. Or trade it back and then draft it again.
And then drafting guys. That's it. I mean, whoever it is, you got to give them help. There is one thing I wanted to ask you, and just getting back to Perry's mock draft here, he has them taking Walker Little in the second round because of a Stefan Gilmore trade, which I want to ask you about. But before I do, Walker Little went to the same college as Davis Mills, who has 0 games on tape. Funny enough, actually, he played about the same amount of games as Trey Lance has. So just curious about your thoughts about Davis Mills, a guy that seems to be, driving up draft boards a little bit to that 3rd, 4th round type of spot. Just curious about your thoughts on him.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Mills is we're seeing him have that sort of Nathan Peterman, who's Davis Webb kind
Oh,
of
God.
rise,
Yikes.
God.
where it's like the guy that has a decent NFL arm that can hit on some throws downfield. Now, look, obviously Mills didn't get a Senior Bowl invite or anything
Jarrett
like
Stidham
that.
a little bit too.
But yeah, I mean, you're, and this always happens as we get closer to the draft. You get these guys that are more day 3 types, have a little bit of buzz around them. If they're going to roll the dice on, say, a developmental project on day 3, I'd rather it be a Jamie Newman than a Davis Mills.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, we talked before the show, Spags, about how with the Duggar pick, with the Josh Uche pick, it seemed like Belichick started to revamp his evaluation process, right? Like, we all look. I knew they were going to draft a safety. I knew they were going to trade out of the first round and draft a safety. Like, I had the tweet like fired up. Yes, Keegan, it's Joe Flacco 2.0. I mean, we're amongst friends here. We can say that. But the typical Belichick pick would have been traded out, drafted a safety, and having it been like the 3-year captain, special teamer guy,
Right.
that knows the system, but he's not an athlete.
Jordan Richards.
Yeah. That would have been the typical Belichick move. But he took a swing on athleticism.
Yeah.
He took a swing on traits. And did Duggar step right in and hit it out of the park? No, but you could see the athleticism. You could see the potential with this kid. Right. And so it makes me think that like Belichick started to look at the way the game is being played right now, and he wants athleticism at the quarterback position. And if you're going to take a swing on a day 3 guy like Jamie Newman, like I think that's the kind of swing you take. Is Newman like a raw talent? Absolutely. Did he make a ton of mistakes on film at Wake before he transferred? Yeah. Did he make mistakes at the Senior Bowl? Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, the end of Wednesday's practice, man, he had some really dumb throws. But I think that you want to make that bet on athleticism with the position, because it's that thing that's going to allow you as a rookie or a younger player. Like if you're figuring the rest of the stuff out, you can make it work as an athlete. Right. Newman has that over Mills. Mills is your prototype pocket passer, battleship, Joe Flacco 2.0, like he said. So yeah, I mean, I'd rather them take a swing on Newman over Mills.
Yep. No. Okay. Well, that's all I need to hear. Pocket passer, I'm out. I'm all out. Out on that.
I mean, if you're going to be a pocket passer in today's NFL, you have to have elite feel, presence, and footwork. Like you have to be Tom Brady in those areas, because that's the reason why Tom Brady's still able to do it when he's 7 months younger than me in the National Football League, is because he has elite pocket presence, feel, footwork. Like if you don't have that, if you can't really move and get out of your own way, if you don't have those sort of secondary reaction skills, then you are going to be in trouble. And I think, look, Dwayne Haskins is a prime example of that. Like, because Dwayne Haskins is that throwback battleship type quarterback. He doesn't have the secondary movement skills. And so since he doesn't have the pocket presence and the, process and speed that Brady has, he was a sitting duck back there. Right. And of course, there are other issues like, partying with people and things like that that got him run out of this town that I'm living in. But we could leave that for another time.
Yeah. So all right. So the obviously the Stefan Gilmore trade here. He has Perry has them trading him for 43 overall, which I think is San Fran, I believe.
From the Niners. Yep.
Okay. So anyways, do you think Gilmore, I threw a poll out there the other day that was like, do you think, Gilmore and 46 could get them 10, with Dallas? I think that's a little crazy, but I was like, well, if Dallas is in win now mode, they may not even have the cap room to do that with having to give Dak a massive contract. But, if they're in win now mode, could you package Gilmore, 46, and even if you had to throw in something else and get that number 10 overall pick? I don't know if that's possible or not, but where do you see his value being? And do you think, look, if it's a 2-year extension, I'm in for the Patriots bringing him back for, for 3 more years.
There's no way he takes a snap though on that current deal, right? What is it? Like
you have to give him an extension. You're going to have to give him an extension and bump this year up and then give him a few more years. The question is, how many more years does he want? If he wants 4 more years, if I'm the Patriots, there's no way I'm doing that. If he wants this year and then 2 more years, well, now I may be thinking about that. And so that's a situation where I think you're going to have to see what that looks like. But I am curious about your thought about what his value might be on the open market.
I mean, could he be part of a deal to get to say Dallas at 10, Giants at 11 would be another team to watch. They could use secondary help. I mean, they had Bradbury, who looked good at times, but they could use another corner. I think that Stefan Gilmore showed over the past 2 seasons that he's a lockdown corner in the National Football League. And there's value to that. There's value to having multiple lockdown corners on a roster. The Patriots are an example of that with Gilmore and J.C. Jackson. You could look at what Brian Flores is building down in Miami with, Jones and Xavier Howard. I mean, when you've got 2 lockdown type of guys, you can play mismatches to your advantage as a defense. You can do different things schematically. Well, you have the ability to potentially leave 2 guys on an island and dedicate safety help to the middle of the field. That's a huge advantage. Or you can go cover zero stuff like Flores was doing this year. And so I think, look, Gilmore is certainly going to have value on the trade market. If I'm New England, I'd try to see if you can get him back on, say, a 2 with a team option for a third. I mean, I think that would be the sweet spot. Would Gilmore do that, though? I don't think so. I mean, I think he's going to want that guaranteed 4th year. That's a lot to pay for a corner that's coming off of an injury. I mean, do you want to tie yourselves up with Gilmore for 4 years? That's the tougher needle to thread. That's a tougher decision, I think. Right.
Spags, you're muted, bro. I think you muted yourself on StreamYard. You muted yourself.
There we go.
There he is.
I did. My bad. No, and I said J.C. Jackson too, right? Like he's obviously restricted. Probably have a 2nd round tender on him. Maybe
I'd throw a 1st round tender on him.
So would I. But realistically speaking, obviously he did switch agents last year too. Drew Rosenhaus is now representing him. So
I'll throw a 1st round tender on him now.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, hey man, that's the question, right? What the heck's going to happen from there? So I think that's going to be a big shooter draft for the Patriots too, because they do have the cap room. But again, you guys are talking about Butler and Guy. Like you got Butler, you got Guy, you got Stephon Gilmore, you got Tooney, you got Andrews, you got James White.
Just get me through these next 4 weeks.
That's it. Seriously. That's it. Just let's get there.
A nightmare. It's going to be an absolute nightmare.
Slow. Slow.
You know what though? You know what's getting us through? Little WandaVision. Me and Taylor have been talking about.
Yeah, you guys have been crushing it.
So it's been fun. You know what I mean? But my goodness, you know what I mean? So that's what he's so Charlie over here is asking about Gilly for the Giants. So 15 and Gilmore for 10 or 11 and whatever the case may be. So and you're right, you mentioned the Giants, so it's like we'll see, right? I mean, but that's a possibility. I mean, if Justin Fields is there at 10, you say, okay, well, I'll take Gilmore and we'll trade him up, package Gilmore in 15 and get 10 and their 3rd round pick or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, because it looks like 76 is they're picking the 3rd.
Yeah.
That gets you into that.
And that fills your gap.
Talking about. That fills the gap.
Right.
Yeah, and look, I'm looking at a mock right now that has Giants going Caleb Fairley, the Virginia Tech corner at 11. So if you're the Giants and Joe Judge, you'd rather probably have Stephon Gilmore than a rookie corner that opted out, as talented as he is.
Right. No, that's a good point. It's a good point. So, all right. I'm not going to touch on all these guys in the mock, but he does have Josh Palmer in the 6th round, and that's a guy that we meant to talk about last week, and we just flat out forgot with Evan when we were talking about wide receivers. Guy that absolutely showed out in the Senior Bowl. I can't imagine him lasting to the 6th round at this point. Just from what he's put on tape. But then again, I mean, I guess, who knows, but it's, his route running. I mean, man, when he hit that like corner route or whatever that out route was, and the dude just fell down. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. He looked great on film. And I was actually talking to Matt Waldman after the Senior Bowl about guys that we were like excited to go back and rewatch their game tape of, and Palmer and, Trayvon Grimes, the other Florida wide receiver, not Kadarius Toney, who everybody was talking about, but Grimes, the other one. Those are 2 guys we were really excited to go back and watch. Amari Rogers was another, and even Powell, the other Clemson wide receiver, was very intriguing. But I noticed, look, Perry loaded up on guys that were down at Mobile,
right?
And something tells me that he's doing that for a reason, because we don't have a combine. So the Senior Bowl is a very good evaluation tool anyway, because you get that week of practice. That's what matters down at the Senior Bowl. Nobody cares about the game itself. It's that week of practice and seeing guys develop over just that 1 week to see how coachable they are. And when you see Phil start loading up on Senior Bowl players, that makes me think that the Patriots as an organization are going to really rely on this week as their big sort of universal evaluation piece of the puzzle, because we don't get a combine. Who cares about pro days? Like, they are what they are. They might double or triple dip on Senior Bowl guys.
And you saw last year too, like what, especially the wide receiver position, what that week can do. Like, remember, kind of beginning of the draft process, Van Jefferson, a guy.
Yep.
Early day 3, maybe late 2, and then he goes 61st to the Rams and had a pretty good rookie year. That was a guy I loved. Obviously, had the NFL experience in the family with his dad, he was the wide receiver coach of the Jets. I think he just got fired actually, but obviously the NFL experience, like guys like that, it can jumpstart them, especially this year, like you noticed, like you noted with no combine, pro days, and everything kind of being still on the fence with COVID and everything else. It's true. Like, that could be a route they go. Heavy mobile guys.
And they do that anyways. So you mentioned it with Duggar and, Jimmy G, same thing. Yep. It's like, they rely on that so much anyways. So then this year, Stidham, same thing, right? So it's like this year, even more so when you don't have all that extra stuff. So, definitely could be interesting. So it's going to be a heck of a, you mentioned Amari Rodgers. I want them to take Amari Rodgers simply because his dad is T. Martin. And I feel like that's the coolest thing ever, that like a member of the Brady Six's child would be playing for the Patriots while Brady's still in the league. It probably would be better if he got drafted by Tampa, but like, screw Tampa. Like, I'd rather him come here because he seems like a good player, So,
no, I mean, he was a guy that I was really impressed with on film anyway. But then just to see him do it at the Senior Bowl, Dwayne Eskridge and Kate Johnson, those are 2 other wide receivers. I mean, that wide receiver group that was down at Mobile was so good.
Yeah.
Now, the flip side of it might have been the fact that the corners weren't great, number one, and number 2, like the one-on-one drills are tough if you're a corner, like covered 5-6 seconds into a play, like that's a tough ask. But that wide receiver group was really good. So it would have surprised me to see if they take 2 receivers from that group alone.
I really hope so. At this point, you need to. You can't ignore it like they did last year.
No, you can't. And look, every XZ slot, all 3 have to be on the table. I mean, Spags is wearing the J11 shirt. We all love Julian Edelman. But yeah, we have to prepare for that day. And so slot receiver is not off the table.
It's coming. Shi Smith. Smith.
Or Kate Johnson, the South Dakota State kid. Either one of those guys, I think. Jacoby Myers is great. He's a fantastic wide receiver 2 in the National Football League, I think. But I don't think anybody's looking at him to be wide receiver 1. You need that guy. If you can't go get a Galladay or an Allen Robinson, and they might not do that because we've seen them do that in the past, you need that X-type guy. And Palmer could be that. So, but they have to add talent to this wide receiver group. Like, it's as open as they were at times. And yes, you can turn on the film from last year. Some of those guys were open and Cam wasn't seeing them, wasn't throwing it. Like, oh yes. I mean, St. Brown is also fantastic. I've locked him in the end of the first round. I think he's probably more of a day 2 guy.
Especially with no Olave now too, who probably would have jumped him.
Right.
Yeah. But this is a good wide receiver group. And I'd like to see them double or even triple dip, because you could.
It's just going to keep getting better too. With like how athletic these kids are now. Like,
and plus,
look at last year,
the 7-on-7 circuit.
Right.
Like, you're just cranking out athletes now. Like, these guys are playing 7-on-7 like 11 months out of the year, and they're just catering to the passing game. That's why there was a great, who was it? Coach Kogan, Kyle Kogan, who's a high school defensive coordinator in like Kansas, I think. He had a video clip of, Mac Jones hitting Devonta Smith on a go route. He was the outside receiver, the number 1 on a trips, left hash to right sideline. And he had the quote, "Nobody throws to the number 1 in trips." Because it used to be, you wouldn't do that. You didn't have kids that could do it. Now, with the 7-on-7 stuff and the fact that the guys are running to stuff passing leagues year round, the passing game is going to get better. The kids coming up are going to be better. Like you said, like the wide receiver position is going to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Like, you might have like 10, 11, 12, 15 first-round wide receivers at some point, just because it's going to be so good.
Yeah, it's true. It's true, man. And it's gonna be a fun. We got 4 weeks. We can make it. We got 4 weeks.
No,
just hold on. We are almost there. It's like We just got to get through a little bit more. Another month of quarantine. We can figure it out. We can get there.
God, I hope so. I'm clinging to dear life. It's going to be a battle, but we will get there. We will get there.
That's right. All right, Mark. Everyone knows you, but give yourself a little plug in and tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter. See, right. I can never do this.
The other way.
There you go.
Mark Schofield. You'll get lots of total references, Scrubs gifs, quarterback stuff. But yeah, Pat's Winnie the Pooh, the Pooh meme. That PFF tweet tonight, man. Can we talk about that for a second?
I didn't see it.
Was it the one where they were like the other? Who was it? The Washington didn't allow more than 28.
Who was the only team in the National Football League that did not allow 28 points or more in a game this season? The Washington Football Team.
Like they had 4 games.
Yeah,
4 games.
They had a playoff game where they gave up 31 points.
Crazy.
I mean, so that didn't get the poo treatment. That got the Jonathan Swain in a Trump interview where he's like,
"What?"
Yeah, that's the one I did for that one. And also, Charlie just mentioned the ScoSo Slack channel. If you want to talk football year round, I got the Slack.
I can vouch for the Slack channel.
Yeah. People talking prospects. People have been doing scouting sessions over Zoom.
Really?
Like people hopped on. They watched, I think, defensive linemen for like 8 hours one Saturday a couple of weeks ago.
God.
Yeah, just watching all 22 all day long. I mean, that's a football nerd's dream. So yeah, you can check that out. But yeah, on Twitter, wherever it is, somewhere in that general direction.
There you go.
Almost got it.
Yeah. So hey, man, thanks so much for jumping on. We appreciate it. Always fun to break it down with you. Always. And we're looking forward to it. And we got 1 month, man. We can do it. We're almost there. We're
Stay strong.
See the light at the end of the tunnel. Take care, guys.
See you guys.